Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to part two of this Gemstone Legends video about Guild War strategy. A very special guest, Cousin Eddie from our In This Together Alliance, who has been running our wars since the very early stages of the beta. So he's dropping some real pearls of wisdom from his experience on this. In part one, we talked about team synergies, some considerations to make around Guild Wars in general. So check that out if that is information um, that is relevant to you, or if you're new to Guild Wars in general. And in this video, we're going to be talking more about the next level of strategy on top of that with war machines and traps, etc. So if you're watching this video and you're not currently playing Gemstone Legends, there are some links in the description for you to click on and check that out. If you use those links as opposed to downloading from the App Store, you'll get a free $50 starter bonus to give you a head start in the game, which I think you might have used as well, since you mentioned in the last video that you started playing from the videos that I made, which is cool to hear. So yeah, links in the description, check that kind of stuff out. And without further ado, let's just jump back in. I think we were starting with traps and war machines. Is that right?
100%. Also, just to reply to what you said, yeah, no, not only did I use, it was a code at the time,
Okay.
not only did I use that, thank you so much, I also ended up pulling a Sven and a Cassia because of it, and was like, I cannot explain how much easier it was to navigate through the challenges of that game with two legendaries right off the top, and those
Yeah.
were straight from gold scrolls that you got me, so I truly
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Yeah, Cassia is still a pretty desirable hero. Yeah, cool.
For
So,
sure.
yeah, we covered the basics of war before, kind of the layout of the battlefield, considerations around team building, and then specifically defenses for legendary, epic, and rare teams. The next kind of layer on top of that is, do they have traps, and are you using war machines? So I'm curious to hear what you want to present um, on those two aspects of Guild Wars.
Sure. Yeah, no, I definitely have some things that, are the secret sauce that makes In This Together what it is.
Okay.
But I definitely want to talk to you guys about how to cultivate your own secret sauce, right? How to make your team, your guild the best that it can be. And I want to start you on the right track. So I'm going to give you guys some information that, is a little important in order to make sure that you get on the right trajectory to be one of the top teams. And yeah, let's start off with machines. Who doesn't like taking a ton of machines and completely decimating a defense? It's one of the most exhilarating parts of this entire game, right? But with that comes an intense amount of strategy. So first thing, you have a med tint that allows you to, it doesn't debuff you from any sort of like negative statuses that you have, but it does just give you HP, right? And then you have the battering rams, which used to do, what'd you say?
A crucial war machine. For anyone who doesn't know, these are items you can bring with you into battle for Guild Wars specifically. And since the defense team can put traps, which we'll talk about in a bit, it's kind of a necessary piece to grapple with whatever you're dealing with on defense.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Battering rams are essential. They're pound for pound, I think the best machine in the game. If I could bring 4 battering rams to every battle, I would do it.
Yeah.
I think pretty much everybody at this point would say the same. But they have gotten a nerf recently, specifically because of what we just said, right? They went from dealing 200% defense to 150% defense. While I like destroying heroes with those battering rams, I do think this nerf was a good call. I want to say that first and foremost. I think Strybot Games hit the nail on the head with this one. It was too easy, even on a competitive level, to go 3 heroes against 4, even against legendary teams, when you had 2 battering rams that essentially knocked any character worth their salt down 50% every time, right? Because that means that you have 2 machines that can, 2 that can kill 1 full hero and then you still have 2 machines left over to deal damage. So you already, if you want to take 3 heroes in against a 4 hero defense, you can. And if you go first, then you immediately get to turn it into a 3-on-3, plus you have the advantage of the machines that you still have remaining. So battering rams are, yeah, like you said, crucial. That's the perfect word for it. The other 2 that I think are still pretty good, catapults. And catapults, they deal damage to all of the heroes, and they have a chance to inflict stun. And then ballistas do a little bit more damage, not as much as a battering ram, but a little bit more damage to one hero specifically. So I'm not going to tell you exactly how many of each machine we use on a regular basis, mostly because I don't think there is necessarily a regular basis. We take notes over each team we face, and when we face them again, we know exactly how many of each machine and each trap we want to bring against them specifically based on what we've learned. But I will say that a really good rule of thumb is maxing out on battering rams. You can get 24 machines for every player on your guild, and you can only get up to 12 of any of the 4, and we always go 12 on the battering ram, not a question. From there, in order of importance, I would say the ballistas are second most important. Only in advanced strategy and only in the top tier, because I think that catapults actually have the edge over ballistas if you have an opponent who doesn't have an extremely high res in their defense teams, right? So I would say that if you guys, if you're in one of the lower leagues, catapults are extremely important and are very good because they can stun the entire team. But as you ascend, you'll notice that your need for catapults lessens and your need for more just straight damage to one hero increases. And as a result, I'd say ballistas for us are second place, catapults, and then the med tints are tough because we have heroes that also dispel. So it's kind of hard to justify spending money and a machine slot on healing when you can do that with a hero.
Yeah, and as you mentioned in top tiers too, since we seem to be living in some of the top tier, in the top tier lately, I guess you could say, I've noticed the effectiveness of the catapults has diminished, where you can use a catapult and get 0 stuns, and you're like, okay, I was really depending on that, and nothing happened whatsoever. Yep. So that's to say that the battering rams and ballistas are at least dependable. They do exactly what they say they're going to do. You may not know the approximate HP of the hero going into battle, but if you're discussing as a team, then you can know on the second hit how much is going to be necessary. But just keep in mind, catapults are not a guarantee, and so it depends on whether you like playing with the RNG or if you like knowing exactly what's going to happen. And I tend to be in the latter camp of I want to know what's going to happen when I use a hero. Just feels better to me. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean with catapults, they're not without use in higher leagues. You just don't hit the towers in the beginning, right? For those of you who don't know, the immediate towers that you attack usually house the best defenses on legendary, or at least the second best legendary teams that a guild has. I'll explain first versus second here in a little bit. That's something we'll talk about later. But catapults are usually best used with rare and epic teams regardless, because those teams are those rarities of heroes are usually heroes that you don't build res on a whole lot, at least not as much as you do with the resurrection team associated with the top guilds in the legendary slot. So because there isn't a team like that, and because battering rams and catapults were in the beginning were just running rampant, the meta has shifted to a much higher defense or higher HP and mid defense for the battering ram, and then a much higher res defensive hero team, especially on legendary.
Mm-hmm. So how do traps fit into this? You mentioned 24 total War Machine slots per player. We tend to max out battering rams at 12, which is the max you can get, so that you have 2 for all of your 6 battles. How do traps fit into that?
So traps are a little different. Traps are 45. In the beginning of the game, up until like last month, you could only set traps defensively, and it had to be before war preparation ended. So you set traps kind of like landmines across your position in an effort to make sure that if they try to go a specific way, or if they just try and, bash through your defense, that you had every opportunity to try and stop them, and in a myriad of ways, because like there are 4 machines, there are 4 traps. But now that you can play with traps offensively, it brings a completely different dynamic to the game, and it makes certain traps more useful than others. And so yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this, because trap laying, as you alluded to in part 1 of this, is kind of my favorite thing. So,
One question I have real quick: do the traps stay
sure.
with the teams, or once a trap is triggered, it is consumed, it does not exist anymore? You would have to re-add an additional trap.
So if you lay a trap on defense and the team is not beaten, that trap stays until the team is beaten.
Okay.
Which means that if you hit a swamp on 19 and you tell the whole guild, swamp on 19, and then you lose, whoever goes to clean up your mess better be ready for a swamp on 19.
So it only matters if you fail the attack. Otherwise, if you succeed in the attack, that team no longer has a swamp on it when the next person attacks it again, because that trap has been consumed. Okay.
Correct. However, and this is a big however, same scenario, team on 19 gets beaten, we take 19. They come back and retake 19. They can cycle their defenses that have lost. So they can put all those defenses that we overtook back, those defensive teams, and then they can reset a trap, specifically the same trap if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to be cognizant of when a defensive team was set in a position, because if you read on guild chat 2 hours ago, swamp on 19, that might not be the case anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might think it's no longer there, attack, and are surprised because all of a sudden there's another swamp on 19.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think traps are a super important part of the game. I think defensively, they're one of the most important parts of the game. And offensively, they allow you to take a foothold in the position, in the defensive, the opposition's position, that can sometimes be insurmountable. So the traps that I think are most important in order of significance and importance are: number 1, swamps. I just talked about it earlier, but speed decreased by 25% is insane in a game where initiative is based solely on speed, right? If your speed is higher, you go first. And that's just the way it is for all characters. The machines that exist whenever you're attacking only can be used when you have initiative. So swamps play a huge part in trying to mitigate the disasters associated with machines by just simply going first and taking what will look like a really good attacking team and crumbling them before you even get the chance to try and turn the corner.
Swamps can be extremely frustrating. Do you expect, kind of a tangent here, do you expect they're going to be balanced in the way that battering rams and things were balanced? Because to me, it's almost, and maybe this is my limited experience, but it seems almost impossible to beat swamps sometimes. You go in and you're like, they're getting 2-to-1 turns to me, and even support heroes are just destroying me. I'm curious if you think if it seems balanced from your perspective, or if you imagine that there'll be some tweaks there.
I think there have to be at some point. I think that when it's one of those things, it's just like an arena. The higher up the rankings you go, the higher the speed of the defensive team. And really it is just kind of like a battle of speed and power. And I think the same holds true for war. You can just kind of concede the idea that you are going to lose to a swamp and prepare for that, knowing they probably have a swamp on a position. But even then, you're running the risk of them going even twice before your characters go once or your heroes go once. And so you really have to be cognizant. I mean, swamps create a position where, as an attacker, you at least have to have enough speed to make sure you don't get lapped.
Yeah.
And then from there, you have to have a team that can withhold whatever damage or whatever status is the defending team's going to put on you, and then fight back in a way that's advantageous for you. It's perplexing at times for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's second? Swamps are number one, most debilitating trap. What do you see as next?
I think it's Caltrops. The ability to decrease the mana gain of the attacking team is almost as big of a deal as the swamps are. Because even if you have the initiative, and even if as an attacking team you can battering ram down one hero, it's so ridiculous how long it takes to be able to use your hero's abilities, that I mean, they get to set up their defenses. And to that end, I personally believe, and this is kind of a hot take, that res teams, like legendary res teams, do better with caltrops than they do with swamps. Leo's not fast. And Nefri is, depending on how you build her, but if you build her quick, then she's not going to be very strong or resilient to attacks. And so I think in a world where people are just kind of used to having to be really, really fast, using caltrops with a res team means that they get to set up, those heroes get to set up everything they need in order to resurrect heroes by the time that you press the button to try and kill them.
Yeah, there's an interesting psychology to the caltrop, because I feel like the swamp, you feel it immediately. It feels like driving your car into a swimming pool where you just stop and you feel that lurching stop as you hit, not a wall, but close to it. And caltrops, you look at the turn counter at the top and it sort of feels like everything is normal. And then you're trying to charge your heroes and it just isn't happening. And it's not to say you don't know what the effects are and you can't calculate how many gems you need at a given moment to charge, but it really messes with you because on the surface, everything looks fine, but you have to remind yourself, okay, this hero normally takes X amount of matches on their turn, and now they take this many. And it is a hard style of play, and I have lost hard to some of those teams before also because it's like something's up even though it doesn't seem like it, so you really have to remind yourself of that as you're playing, or you'll lose, so there's interesting psychology to that, because I think swamps get all the attention like you talked about.
For sure. And I mean, like, let's be honest, you, just like any other game or sport, like I alluded to in part one, or I said, you build a muscle memory, right? Which makes sequencing incredibly important, and, being prepared there. But also, you have certain heroes that are speed 18, 19, 20, all the way up through 25 for the most part, right? And so you are used to a certain amount of tiles, meaning you are going to be able to use that hero. And so instead of looking at that bar down at the bottom, you're looking at who am I attacking next? And then you see that you matched 5 purple tiles. Oh, okay, cool. My Zarkon's about to go off. So you plan that. He's not gonna go off, and not for another 3 or 4 tiles. And so now you're just scrambling for purple tiles. You stacked purple. They aren't there.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's like, what do I do if I just sit here with a Zarkon that hits very little because I've put all speed and ACC into it.
Yeah.
And can't go off because there isn't a purple tile, because my team and the opposition's team has purple heroes and they're soaking them up.
Yep. Yeah. So it's funny. In this moment, I can't even think what other traps there are, because those are the two that I only ever see. And I genuinely wonder, are there other traps? Are there other things?
There are other traps. I don't think that they're as good, but we definitely should talk about them, I think.
Yeah, isn't there like a fortify, or I remember reading them when they came out, but I've literally never seen them in play.
Yeah, no. Well, that's because we don't use them very
Yeah.
often. Yeah, so the other one that exists is Pitfall.
Mm,
Pitfalls reduce significantly. If you look at the numbers, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it is a significant decrease in crit rate and crit damage.
mhm,
And the only issue with that is that swamps affect everyone
mhm,
and caltrops affect everyone.
mhm,
Not every hero is good because their crit rate and crit damage are high.
mhm,
And so, because that's the case, unfortunately, they're not nearly as good, in my opinion, as the two that I spoke to earlier.
yeah.
And that's not to say that they don't have their uses, I guess. They're not as good. And it's specifically because, like I said, they don't necessarily have use other than heroes that are one like heavy hitters, like we talked about earlier with Sophia and Akuma,
Mhm,
and in other colors like Raphael, right? An AoE hitter that if you build crit rate to 100 or 115 and you build crit damage to 200, can just 20k an entire board,
mhm,
right? Don't get me wrong, it's very enticing to want to say, "Ooh, that looks good," because I remember in my brain the feeling of getting hit by Raphael, and there's nothing worse. And I tend to agree with you. It's terrible.
mhm.
But when you set that, you'll notice that other teams will just zip right by them. And in my opinion, at the time, and the way it's written right now, it's not necessarily a trap that I'm willing to invest a whole. I mean, because we invest a lot of time, a lot of you know uh, raid boss tokens, right?
Mhm.
And even some money in certain cases on these traps. And so it's just one of those that I feel like take it or leave it. I definitely leave it behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, is there any is there anything else? Are there any traps that no one else uses?
Um, well, now I feel bad because now I feel unprepared. I knew the fourth trap going into
Yeah.
this, and I just can't
I
remember
would say
off the
the
top
fact
of my
that you are planning for our wars and you can't think of it is a testament to whether you should worry about it as a viewer. Swamps and caltrops are the keys, and I think that was a really interesting bit of insight that you added. Of swamps get all the attention because you really feel that, but there are situations where caltrops can be more effective, and that is with these really resistant teams that aren't completely built around speed. Like you said, you want a really tough Leopold, so you don't want him to be fast because that means you're sacrificing defense and HP, and you need him to be just an absolute tank that's going to keep bringing people back. So just affecting how easily you can charge your hero to try to stun him or silence him or something like that is just going to be much harder. And if you do happen to get a bad board or you're sharing colors with the team that you're playing against, it can take a long time to charge specials. So it's Caltrops will really punish. I mean, anything will punish a bad board, I guess, but Caltrops has its place, I think is what I'm trying to say. And I think you agree with that.
Definitely. And like I said, and like you said that I said, I think in certain cases, it's not just it's not just okay, or like it's not just comparatively good to swamps. I think it's like better in certain
Yeah.
cases, like you said, because ultimately, what is a speed differential going to do for you when Leo has 1700 attack?
Yeah.
Right. I remember the fourth trap because
Okay.
we used to use them only tangentially and only with taunt heroes
Hmm.
in the defense. Back when we used taunt heroes in our defenses predominantly. Before res teams, you needed a taunt hero to kind of bog down the way that Leo Nefri combo does. The Leo Nefri combo is stronger, so we use it. But if you don't have those, a really good Alexander or a really good Martin or Najar can do your defense a lot of good.
Mhm.
And with those, we use barricades, which increase the defense and the res of your entire team by a significant margin.
Got it.
So but the problem is, and this is what we learned, is that if you bring a barricade that increases your defense into a battle against battering rams that hit you based on the percentage of defense you have, you've kind of shot yourself in
You
the
mean
foot.
HP? Or battering rams are based on HP, I thought.
I think that
Or
I
are they?
may, maybe I'm wrong, but
You're
I
probably
think
right.
no, it's so what they do is they hit, I just checked to make sure they hit 20% HP and 150 defense now instead of 200. So you'll notice whenever you hit with a battering ram, there's like 2 or 3 little
Mhm.
damage numbers that hit. One of
Mhm.
them's the HP, one of them's defense. And so and that's to make sure that battering rams are effective, right? If they only built them for dealing damage to defense, then everybody would just play these low defense, high HP heroes like Taiko-san and just try and like win that way.
Mhm.
But if you go just straight defense, then characters like Sophia are all of a sudden just not any good, and you need those strong defense heroes to exist in a healthy meta game. And so that's why I think they did the little cocktail of a little bit of both. And so we were both right.
So I think you said in the first part there was one particular use case you wanted to mention as a testament to traps, and I
Yes.
think as we also talked about, a testament to creativity and strategy, and there not being one right way to do things.
Yeah. So let's talk about a guild war that we had a couple of months ago. I believe it was against Wilco. And what they tended to do at the time, this is no longer the case. I don't want to give away their secrets. That seems unfair. But what they tend to do early was they would kind of get you as an opponent to squabble over the towers in the middle. And when they had exhausted your good hitters, your attackers, then they would invade. And on your position, they would just hold all the campfires. And for those of you who don't know or don't remember, the campfires are the rarity positions. So they get you all up in a hot mess. They get you attacking. They get it to where everybody on the guild list has 0 out of 24 hits. And then they hold that and they play on your side of the park for the rest of the game. And it doesn't feel good because your side of the park has your treasury and
Mhm.
you don't want to lose that. And you don't want to lose the game. Obviously, this is a competitive game.
Mhm.
So I had a feeling they were going to pull this on us again. And I didn't really like what they did to us the first time because they did take the treasury. So what I did was I put 0 swamps on the towers and I was like, you know what, go for it.
Doors
And
open. Come on in.
yeah, no, we're
Little
just at
Home
this
Alone
point.
situation.
Yeah, and it was weird because instead of squabbling over towers, instead, they just go, oh, they're just gonna, okay, cool. Well, then we'll just line up our rear foothold and everything. All 20 were swamped.
Mhm.
Uh, and so immediately you started seeing on war chat, like our team player won in defense, our team player won in defense, our team
Yeah.
player won in defense, because no one was talking to each other. Everybody's like, oh, they're just the campsites or the fire, yeah, the campsites. So it'll be fine. And they're not, like no communication, I'm presuming, and they just all went in and we got so many points.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to watch, at least to see, oh, okay, cool, so like we look a little beat up, but we haven't used any of our hits and
Yeah.
we've got plenty of stuff to go.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think is interesting that I saw in Arena and I see in War. Since this game is smaller relative to Empires and Puzzles and is still developing in a lot of ways, good ways too, like listening to player feedback and making important changes. Um, you kind of get to know some of the bigger players. And so if you're in the arena, you're like, oh, I remember this guy, and this is how his team was built, and I'm going to approach it differently. And I see the same thing happening in wars now, like what you mentioned. Hey, they tried to do this to us last time. I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to change our strategy dramatically. And that had an outcome, a positive outcome for us. So I think it's kind of, some people might try to knock the game for that fact, but it does allow for some strategic opportunities to say, okay, here's what they tried to do last time. We're going to just let them on through. And, there's an interesting strategy there. And I think that's where these wars shine in general. And so I kind of like that fact that we get to know some of these teams and we can learn from our experiences and try to come back and use what we know about them to our advantage instead of constantly playing different teams where you're just like, well, I guess we'll try this. There's something cool to being able to learn from that. And yeah, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I definitely like the idea that wars are more than just, oh, they brought this color today. Okay, well then I guess they're going to, like, oh, everybody's purple. Oh, I guess we're just gonna have to fight with yellows.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day about wars and how Gemstone Legends is so different. And looking back at Empires and Puzzles, which of course I still play, and there's a number of things I enjoy about it. The wars are like colonial wars where you just have two squads of people standing at each other and just firing in straight lines. And it's like, if you have more, or if you can, take a hit or they miss more or whatever, then you win. Yeah. Gemstone Legends has a lot more. It's a lot more like modern kind of warfare where there's strategic points to hold. You can choose to hold them differently. You can let them right on in, thinking that, oh, nobody's home. Let's go, attack, and then boom, you have a trap waiting for them. So yeah, it's just something I wanted to mention because I think wars and Empires and Puzzles are a little stagnant, and their idea of making it interesting was to introduce the different variations of rush attack, and we used to have field aid and equalizer and all these different things, but it's just kind of a twist on the same thing. And that's something I've appreciated about the Gemstone Legends Wars is the increase in strategy, not only that is kind of required, but also just the opportunity for that. So I think it really invites players that want to utilize that creativity, especially knowing an opponent, to see if you can, get the upper hand by being creative.
Yeah, and that's and to your point, I think that the complexity of the situation, right, of the actual board, of the positions, of the treasury versus the gate versus the towers versus the camps versus the campsites versus the interior towers, it breeds creativity because you have to stay connected in order to take a treasury, and two, you have ascending point values for different positions, so you're incentivized to play on the other opponent's side of the field, yet at the same time realize that most of your competitive battles are going to be done on the interior tower and the campsite level. And that you're right, it brings a richness to the game that I personally love strategizing around. And that's yeah, that was the Swamp Song campfires is definitely like one of my favorite stories to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just gonna say, to that end, I have a couple of other strategies that I've seen either us do or somebody else do that I also would absolutely love to talk about.
All right, so we're going to hold it there for part 2. From our perspectives, I think we've covered a lot, or Eddie mostly, have covered a lot of the core aspects of war, from defense teams to offensive teams to traps to the layout of the battlefield to some of the reasons for why you should think about these things and what you should do with that. And we're going to bring all of this together, or again, Eddie's going to bring all this together in part 3, where we're going to talk about advanced strategies. So now that you know all these things, what do you do with it? What are some of the top teams doing that you can bring down to your league? And yeah, we've got a few examples to go through with that. So I'm really, really excited for part 3, because this is going to be where everything from these first 2 parts comes together. And I haven't seen anyone else for this game talking about this stuff. So I think this is a really, I mean, I might be biased here, but I think this is a really good resource for teams in the lower league to kind of get access to some of the privileged information from the higher up leagues. And I am excited at the potential of this changing the Guild War scene from the lower leagues up, and to see what the effects of this might be. I think kind of opening up this information potentially has some cool effects. Do you have anything else you want to add to that note before we sign off here again?
No, I just want to thank you. And I am so incredibly excited to talk to you guys in part 3. So please, if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button, comment below, and I cannot wait to see you in part 3.
Thank you, man. So thank you guys so much for watching. You heard the information there, what to do. Links in the description for checking out the game, and we will see you in the next video.